lovely sunny May 23rd afternoon here on Shelter Island. This is a memory tribute to Carol Russell, a wonderful member not only of the Garden Club, Friends of Trees, but also of the Art Rich Poetry Roundtable. And I knew her through two avenues, both the Garden Club and the Art Rich Poetry Roundtable. And I'm going to just introduce this a bit, but we have all these guest speakers here who have come either from the Poetry Roundtable or the Garden Club, and they will be telling you about, let's see, all these people. So I'm just going to start. I always thought of Carol as the character played by Katharine Hepburn in the movie Holiday. I hope some of you have seen that movie. The Hepburn role of Linda is fey, delightful, deeply sincere, peremptory, also playful and clever. Of course, she questions false values and ends up running away with Johnny Case, played by Cary Grant. Those qualities of inner magic, deep sincerity, standing for decency, cleverness, and imaginative play were in real life qualities that Carol Russell exhibited in all she did. I remember one Garden Club luncheon when she confessed to me that she felt she could never be a sophisticate because she had gotten tipsy on her wedding day. No nix nor a she, and Carol felt she had ruined her whole reputation as a sophisticate, feeling dreadful after champagne. In another hilarious confession, she revealed that when she was a young teenager, she took out the family boat, a small sailing vessel, and promptly beached it on a sandbank. She met the challenge with aplomb by using her time to go clamming for an impromptu picnic and waited out for the tide to return. That story amazed me. I'm not afraid of boating. And she had courage and a certain blitheness. Now we're going to hear from a member of the Garden Club, Judy Brandenstein, who has some memories. That's you, yes? It has some memories of Carol that she'd like to share with us.
So some rather personal from Carol.
That's fine. That's fine.
She and I were pretty friendly for a while. I first met Carol Russell at St. Mary's Church. She was married to Bill, and they both sang in the choir. They seemed very happy. He died suddenly while they were on a road trip down south. She drove him back home to Shelter Island, avoiding complications. Carol and Bill owned some real estate in Connecticut. When the bottom dropped out of the market, she lost much of their savings. She had it rough financially. She was forced to rent small residences through the years. She never complained, and she was always upbeat. She and her brother were adopted. Her adoptive mother was schizophrenic. The father was well-to-do. Carol had 3 children, 2 girls and a boy, I believe. One of the girls was killed while crossing the street in Florida after attending a movie. Carol was eccentric, but very capable. I remember seeing her act in The Gin Game. She acted in the play solo and was amazingly good. She very generously ran the Junior Garden Club program for many years. The kids loved her. She chaired Arbor Day at the school, selecting and planting a different specimen of tree on the school grounds each year. She displayed daffodils at the library each spring, showing examples of each class. She was never at a loss for words. I heard she died rather unexpectedly sitting on the front porch at Eleanor Labrosi's house where she was living. We miss her cheerful banter.
Yeah, that's lovely, Judy.
Okay, thank you.
You really captured that. Many people wrote me because they couldn't be here. As I said, they kept taking falls and getting sick. But here's from Jeannie, who's not feeling well at all today. Jeannie McClintock, who is the president of the Garden Club. And she wrote, I remember when President Willie Braunschweig appointed Carol Russell to the juniors. It was the beginning of a long relationship to the children. Mrs. Russell, as she was always referred to, ruled those youth with a velvet hand. She was adored by them, and the programs she put on with them were amazing. I look back at our flower shows, and the junior garden always made a terrific showing. Carol also was in charge of Arbor Day for the Garden Club, as you've heard. Numerous trees were planted by this program, chosen and cared for by Carol. She painstakingly researched where to purchase the trees and where to plant them. Many a time I would pass by a site to see Carol watering her specimens. On a personal note, she and Harry used to visit my mother when I went out, and I come back finding them enjoying wine and chatting up a storm. After these visits, I find out from my mom what a fascinating life Carol had led and how interesting she was. Carol was full of love and caring. You could only look at all the years of her dedication to the youth to see how much they appreciated her. What a lady. So that was from Jeannie McClintock. Now this is from Marge Sear. And it's in very tiny print, so just a minute here. I'm sorry to miss your tribute to Carol, but wanted to share my, brief contact with her. I first met her in sailing at the yacht club. Her enthusiasm to try new things expanded to learning pickleball. I was thrilled to see her regularly at the school interacting with young kids after school. She seemed to keep them busy and had them creating new ways to integrate them in interest them in plants and gardening and preparing for garden show exhibits with their own creations. Even boys loved the attentions and enthusiasm. She became an aid to a good friend and then moved on to other things. She will be missed by many on Shelter Island. That's from Marge Sear. Hold on, more. And Joan Moore said, Carol worked wonderfully with children, the future of our club. Again, the garden club. And this is from Karen Brush. Hi, I will be traveling to my nephew's college graduation and will miss the tribute to Carol. If I wrote a very brief remark, would you be willing to read it? Yeah. We worked together on daffodils and the junior gardening program, and I counted her as a friend. She is sorely missed. That's from Karen Brush, and you know what a marvelous gardener Karen Brush is. And this is from Yvonne Korshek. Now, last year at this time, we had a program here, and Leela Zembrain was supposed to be here, and I'll tell you a little more about that, and she couldn't, and so I had to fill in quickly with my wonderful people from the Art Rich Poetry Roundtable. And who was the person I called on first? Of course, it was Carol Russell, and she was amazing. And so this is from Yvonne, who watched Carol that night. Yvonne was one of the guests, and she watched Carol that night. Hi, Virginia, and thank you for the invitation to the memory tribute, also teeny printer, for Carol Russell. We won't be in Shelter Island at that time, or we would surely be there. I didn't know her well, but I really was struck by the wonderful time she was having, participating in and reading at the event in the library you hosted about Shelter Island poets. She loved it, and as did all who were there. It was a happy moment that I'm sure she was thinking about and re-enjoying right before her passing, because it was right after that everything happened. And this is from Tim, but Tim is here, so I'm going to let him speak for himself. So Tim, you're on.
First of all, I just have to remark upon your choice of holiday. I always was struck by Carol's, I don't know if you call it an accent or her speaking voice, but she did have sort of a mid-Atlantic tint to it. And I always remember she would leave messages on my phone machine. She had a very distinctive voice. Anyway, Carol and I used to collaborate on the Arbor Day celebration at the school. And she always would call me several months ahead of time to be sure we were prepared. And I just really enjoyed seeing her speak to the students, and she had such enthusiasm for the trees and for Arbor Day and for educating the children about the trees. And it was really wonderful to see. And the other part of it is all the trees that she planted at the school. For those of you who don't know, I'm president of Shelter Island Friends of Trees, and we plant trees in public spaces on Shelter Island. But one of the things I also do, which I wish I did more, was give tours, tree tours. And I often pick the school because, thanks to Carol, there's a wonderful selection and variety of trees there that's sort of one-stop shopping. That you can go through all those trees and sort of, they really, all those trees touch upon different aspects of trees. And so, you know, it's wonderful that she will have, as her daughter Christine said just moments ago, a legacy. And that really is a wonderful legacy that she has left all of us. So I and all of us thank you for that.
Thank you, and thank you for recalling that. Carol was learned. She knew mythology and great literature. She disappeared into her work, in her enthusiasm, and she saw beyond conventions and manners of time. I knew how much she had done for the Garden Club, and I knew of her interest in poetry. So I asked her to join the Art Rich Poetry Roundtable when I knew I was stepping down as a facilitator. I wanted someone who was on the island all year and was able to organize. It took a while to convince her to join, but when she joined, she was amazing. First of all, she knew how to copy and paste. Oh my goodness, nobody else ever seemed to learn that. And she knew how to send notices and knew the best literature to submit for contemplation. Between Ted Gannon and Carol, the Winter Tire group blossomed with exciting meetings. I loved Martin Anbinder and Yvette Jansen, but they're not here all the time. And so I had to get other people in who are here year-round. And who before Carol had sent out such charming illustrations to accompany her poetry choices. Now we want to hear from members of the Art Rich Poetry Roundtable, Martin Anbinder, Irene Cornell, Karen Pierre, and Yvette Jansen. You can read in any order you wish. That's Yvette, right?
I'll pick up from what Virginia said, because I was in the poetry group and very much enjoyed being with Carol. Her enthusiasm, her theatrical flair, her charm, all the things that you mentioned, but I really got to know her when the lovely lady Jocelyn, who used to help us with our poetry documents that were prepared for each week, when she became ill and she was no longer able to do it. And Carol offered to step in and take this on. And I remember Carol used to use a clamshell telephone, and I remember, I don't know, you know, but
Nothing wrong with that.
well, that she was going to be computer savvy enough to do all this. I certainly wasn't, but yes, absolutely. Well, Carol started, and what was amazing was the growth trajectory that occurred, because she started kind of putting them together for each week. She paid attention to every detail. Was it correctly put down? Did we have the translator right? If it was a translated poem, and how should we arrange it? And I began to enjoy talking with her week by week. Then she began to match illustrations to the poems, and she just found the most wonderful illustrations to go with the different poems, and they were always just right. I think everybody who was here remembers that. And so it became, now that I'm hearing these other comments, that's how I really came to know her, to see her grow into this project and make it something that became more and more elaborated in a good way every week, and it was very precious. Was something that I will never forget, how she could do that.
Thank you, Yvette. Thank you.
I knew Carol through the Art Rich Poetry.
This is Martin Anbinder.
And she was her own person. She was always lively in her contributions. And I admired her because she stuck to what she believed in. She often took exception to poems that were of a very depressing, down nature, particularly if they ended that way. The poem ended that way. And Carol would kind of give thumbs down. She always somehow insisted there had to be an uplift at the end of the poem. Well, that was Carol. And I love Carol. And I went to her funeral. And I have such a wonderful memory from that funeral, which was a beautiful service. And her picture was up in the church. But I guess it was her grandson. Somebody, when her coffin was lifted up, someone bent over and kissed the coffin. And I was so moved by that. And it said to me so much about Carol, that she engendered love in her family and in those around her. So those are my words about Carol.
Thank you, Lauren. Karen?
Hi, Karen
This is
Karen.
Karen here.
First of all, I just want to ditto what everybody said before me. I mean, they broke the mold after they made Carol. And I remember the first time, this is like in the 70s, when I first saw her, she always wore these big, huge hats when she was going in or out of the school and involved with the kids with the junior garden club. And I can remember asking somebody, who is that woman? She's like right out of a Victorian novel, like Jane Eyre or something. So she was just a delight. And all the conversations we had over the years that I knew her, particularly through the poetry group, I never heard her say an unkind thing about anybody. And if I ever tried, because I like to say unkind things, she'd say, now stop that. She just was upbeat, positive. She always looked at the bright side of life, and she just wasn't particularly interested in the dark side. Anyway, it was a real treat to know her. It's a real loss to have lost her.
Thank you, Karen. Eileen Cornell?
Carol believed in happy endings. And all I could think of when she died, when I heard that she died, was that she had been very much alive the night before, the night before, at the poetry reading, when she was very dramatic, carried on so beautifully, and the next morning, or the next day, she died. And I thought, my goodness, she got what she wanted. She got a happy ending.
Yes, that's right.
What Martin said is so true. She didn't like the poems. If they were sad, if they were about war, if they were about violence, anything was just no good. She would change the ending. And then she would say, so there. And as for the poems, she picked some more about sailing. She always took great delight in telling about her own sailing adventures, which were really something. And then she liked children's poems. She was really a Robert Louis Stevenson kind of poet. She, how do I like to go up in a swing, up in the air so blue? She would love something like that. I would think the pleasantest thing ever a child can do. And she just infused the group with this idea that everybody had to be positive, or you wouldn't get it by Carol. She was very memorable.
Well, thank you, Eileen. That was a lovely memory, and
Yes.
all of you so described her so well. Yes. Oh, Tim, I've got one thing.
We're gonna be planting some trees, hopefully sometime in the next month. one of those trees will be dedicated in memory of Carol.
Well, thank you all. Carol was constantly surprising me with knowledge in many areas. She knew about she knew who Robin Woodson was. He's a civil rights leader that we both admired, a strong advocate for the best in minority neighborhoods. He's not somebody who gets because he's not a screaming maniac. He's a decent, wonderful human being. But she knew about him, and I was surprised. One day we had a conversation about him. 2 years ago when I turned 80, and my youngest sister had just turned 70, we celebrated our birthdays together at the Ram's Head Inn. My sister Lorraine invited her actor friends from New York City and other friends, and I invited my writer friends and artist friends from Shelter Island and Up Island. Of course, I invited Carol, who arrived with gifts of plants for us, cards, and wearing her favorite hat. She looked perfect. She was from another time in many ways, a lady who sent handwritten notes but could email, copy and paste. A thoughtful guest who appreciated everything and always wrote thank you notes. I took pictures, even some video. I have a tiny, tiny clip. It just goes like that. As Carol looking happy and serene as Janet Culbertson Andrews. They sat across from each other, but I couldn't hear what they were saying. We were all jumping up and down reading poems about aging. That's what we did. It was a crazy idea for the party, but that's what we did. Two friends, now gone, on a second of tape. But that's the way it goes. I know Carol enjoyed herself because she told me so in a little handwritten note, of course. Last year when I needed help for the Richard Varney Memorial reading, Leela Zembaring was detained in Argentina. Carol stepped in with Yvette Jansen and Karen Kier to read Leela's poetry. Leela's poetry is challenging, and we had a little rehearsal here before. But Carol led the way in making all clear and thrilling to hear. I'll never forget her talent that night. Only after her death, so soon after that night, did I learn of Carol's theatrical exploits. I wish I had known about them early because I've done a lot of theater too, and we could have talked about that, but I didn't know about that. Right now, I'd like to give something to Christine, Carol's daughter. Get it? Because Carol's daughter, Christine Keefe, Aiello, I hope I'm saying that right, is here.
Yes.
And you can have this little bag too.
Oh,
And what this is, I collected a lot of things that Carol sent people in the poetry group, including some of the illustrations. I printed them out for you. And I also, the little things she would send. And I also gave you a picture of her and the articles you asked, the newspaper articles. And I also included a little poetry book for you, which I have to put your name on later. Remember that at dinner. And here you go with this little thing. And you maybe want to say something about your mother.
Sure, thank you.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Okay, and do you want to sit or do you want to?
I'll just stand here by my daughter. I had to write it because
All right, fine.
it
Yeah.
might be, yes.
Yeah, you may want to turn that way. I don't know whether the camera
Oh,
or
I'll stand.
stand or something. Yes. Yeah.
Hello, I am Christine Keefe, Carol Russell's daughter. Thank you all for being here today. Our family chose Shelter Island in Watermill about 30 years ago now, partly because my mother lived here in Shelter Island, and so she was not so far away. I have been and still am proud that my mother lived here for so long. It is a uniquely special and beautiful place. I am so happy that she absolutely loved it. She never wanted to leave, ever. I am also proud of her involvement and accomplishments here. She taught the youth division of the Garden Club for so many years, and she loved teaching, and also that the students would remember her as they grew older. They would recognize her and say hello sometimes when we were together, and she loved that. I'm proud of her gorgeous trees that she planted on the grounds of the Shelter Island School. One particular is for a local fallen soldier. She also was passionate about the teaching garden at the school and the annual daffodil show. I'm also proud and impressed that she sailed here. She won a serious sailing competition when she was about my age. I'm 62. There's a plaque at the Shelter Island Yacht Club which commemorates her win. She was very competitive. She loved poetry and Tuesday Poetry Roundtable. She absolutely loved it. And generally reading anything well written, like the articles in the New Yorker magazine. She shared her subscription with me. Now I find it hard to part with those issues. We lost my sister Catherine when she was 12 and I was 18. It was extremely difficult, but my mother persevered. She showed me that it was possible to overcome great loss. She said that life was like chapters. It's important to know how to turn the page. She wasn't always excellent. There were times we argued, but she was always ready to move on and forgive before I was. My mother was amazing at listening. She would talk to my sister and me for hours, and she would ask, "How are you feeling?" which sometimes required a really, really long answer. But during these phone conversations, I used to love to make her laugh. I will also just, by the way, miss her weather updates. She and I were both really into the weather, and for a few months after she passed, I had no idea what was happening with the weather. So I had to start watching the weather now. She was also a stickler for manners. She was occasionally just intolerant. A few weeks ago, my daughter Marie was taking care of her other grandmother, and her other grandmother was worried about saying something about the poor table manners of her other grandchildren. Whereupon my daughter said, "Don't worry about saying something, Nanny. My other grandmother, Carol, just refused to eat with us altogether." Of course, we all learned many valuable lessons from my mother. One comes to mind as we remember her today. I'm not sure who had passed away, but I was getting dressed for the funeral and I was wearing entirely black outfit, shoes, everything. It was very dark. And she looked at me and she said, "You know, it's okay to have a little color." And she gave me a cheery red scarf, just like you said, upbeat, just a little upbeat. Anyway, she didn't need to say more. So anyway, it's hard that she's gone. I'm still very sad, but I trust that sadness will eventually be replaced with positive memories.
Thank you, Christine. For the library, and if somebody from the library would come up, I know it's in a plastic bag, but I was trying to keep it in case it started to rain again. Because this is in memory, and there's a cover letter, and this is in memory of Carol, and it's the Poetic Edda. I think she'd like that because she loved heroic verse, she loved classical mythology, and that little book has a lot of scholarship in it too. And that new translator, a woman, included a quest by a woman in there that normally is not included, and I think Carol would have liked that.
We'll put a special plaque in the front.
Yes, thank you so much. And if you ever want to give, they have a special plaque in memory of Carol, if you want to give books to the library in her name. Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Terry. That's our director of the library, right? Yes. Now, is there anyone else here who would like to say something about Carol? Maybe somebody from any junior gardeners here? Well, not a junior gardener, but I know Vivian from the garden club.
I'm not a junior gardener.
No, I know that. Vivian.
Yeah.
Bring
I
it
am
in.
from the garden club, and I've worked with Carol a number of times. But I think that you all captured the essence of Carol so beautifully. If I had to give an adjective of Carol to describe her, I would say exuberant. That there just seemed to always be an aura of joy around her. And then hearing what you're saying, so it wasn't my imagination.
Right.
We were all very lucky to have
Have
her as a friend.
Did Mary Chabor ever show up? I'm not sure I know.
She was later.
Because I didn't want to leave her out. Is there anyone else who wanted to say? Yes?
I met Carol.
Who are you?
I'm John Kirk. I met Carol through Meals on Wheels, and I deliver Meals on Wheels all over the island. And I'm an alternate. I'm not the steady person because there's 4 different routes. I get to go on all 4 different routes, so I get to see everyone who receives a meal. Well, she'd show up on all these different houses because she would caregive other people, or she was living with different people. And she would make me late for the rest of my rounds every time. Because we always end up with an incredible discussion. We either talk about plants or poetry or politics, which go on for hours. And people got their meals cold. So
Thank you so much. Yes.
Yeah, my name is Eda Kasik, and I started knowing Carol through Junior Garden Club. And this is my daughter Johanna.
Hi.
And first was huge help because she was running that garden club every single week after school, starting 3 o'clock and 2 hours. And then was started babysitting and many kids. And she always made lemonade as tea. You know, she loved her own tea, and she said, okay, they have to learn how to drink tea, and always cookies and popcorn. Kids were happy. They really, really loved her. And then I put together some pictures.
Oh, thank you.
Some, and these are cutouts from Shelter Island Reporter. And then first one is 2013. My daughter is born in 2007. Then you can see, and she's already on the picture, then you can see how many years she enjoyed that garden club. And since we talked about Carol's love for poetry, then she really tried to drag all these kids in and let's write poetry together. Let's do, like then she was reading poetry for them. And then like kids, like, what to write about? You know, like, what? And then she always said, let's just go outside, look trees and flowers and write something. And that's how my daughter wrote a poem about bleeding hearts, because that's what we have in our backyard. That's why we brought the bleeding hearts here. That's how we wrote. And then she won poetry contest.
Wonderful.
Yes, and that was, wow, it was, I think like 8 years old, you know. Then that's how she really tried to teach kids everything. And then it was nice day, and even it was rainy day. Then always school, playground, and let's go and see trees. You know, and then can you see different leaves? And I think, yeah, you came a couple times. Especially I think in fall, to like show different shapes and colors. And kids they really loved her. But yeah, that you can see, like we're talking about hats. You know, when you look these pictures and photos, yes, hats. Then yeah, just when you are leaving, then stop a little bit and then just see this wonderful smile. But the kids really loved her. Then maybe you can say something.
Well, I'm Johanna Catholic. I was part of the junior garden club. And obviously I was younger, so I don't remember that much. But like, what really strikes me is like, I always remember how Mrs. Russell, she was always super well-mannered, very like soft-spoken, but you know, always gave her opinion. But as most of you said, she was always constantly optimistic. It was never pessimistic, and she was also constantly like encouraging. It was never like, oh, you're doing this wrong, you put this flower here, shouldn't do it. It was always like, oh, like, you want to write about this, or you want to talk about this, and she always has some kind of story to go along with it. And like I remember another member who was in garden club, one time she was like, oh, you know, I don't want to make a flower arrangement, I want to write a play about fairies. And so then we went, and we were at Gardner's Bay, and we performed this whole play that Mrs. Russell encouraged, and it was just wonderful. And like, I feel that a lot of her manners sort of stuck with me, and it was just like, she was just very pleasant all the time. It was never like some other teachers at the school, you know, they'll be yelling, they'll be like complaining, you know, and she was always like very calm, and it was just very pleasant to be around her. And, yeah.
Oh, thank you so much. Eleanor, do you want to talk about what you brought?
Well, I just picked out some, photos from the garden club. We used some photos that I could.
But it's a slideshow.
Yeah, I just
People can
put a
look
bunch
at,
together, like 40
look at
photos
pictures.
and then some other pictures. Because most of them have been archived, so by the time I started archiving, it took too long. So there's like 40 there.
Well, thank you.
And,
We will look at
and her
that.
last birthday, and is there a little video there of her last birthday?
Okay, well, I want to look forward to that. I haven't seen it yet. Carol and I talked about books. I'm watching our time. I think I'm okay. Whenever we met, and that's how I learned of her interest in a book I wanted to teach. I never got the opportunity to teach it. And it's called, I'm going to say his name wrong, Milorad Pavic, Landscape Painted with Tea. And how had she found this very challenging book? She never explained to me. I think she just found it on her own. You mentioned that she would read The Atlantic and things like that, or the New York Review of Books, or the New Yorker. I mean, she might have learned about it because it's not a book that most people would even come across. It's translated from the Serbian, right there is a problem. And it is delightful, it's wild. It is like Borges went to Romania and got drunk. It's just an amazing book. And I loved it. I don't always agree with some of the postmodern philosophy in it, but I love the book. And it has crossword puzzles in it. I love crossword puzzles. And it's a book of delightful enigmas. and serious philosophical questions, and maybe you're not gonna get the answers. And since we have time, right, I'm gonna read a teensy-weensy passage, very tiny, because everybody's wild now about copyright laws. But when I was teaching, sometimes you had to illustrate something by explaining and reading, especially since my students seem to read one word at a time. College, unbelievable. But anyway, this is a little bit from this wild book, Milo Radpavic's Landscape Painting with Tea. I think it came out in 1993 originally, and then was translated into English.
You're gonna read it in Serbian?
No, over here doesn't know any Serbian. And again, tiny print. For the first few, this is from chapter 2. For the first few centuries, they lived in the deserts of the Sinai. Then one morning, a nail fell off a wall in Constantinople, and with it all the nails throughout the Byzantine Empire started falling off the walls. That nail, which had moved all the other nails, also moved the monks from Sinai and drove them to a new place. Their migration went like this. When the Roman prince Peter removed his helmet once and for all, and had drunk from his fill of wine, he decided to live an ascetic life. He looked for a place where nobody would be able to find him, a place where nobody knew his name. Such a place, everybody told him, did not exist in the empire. And then in his dream, a woman appeared, shod in her own hair, with gloves knitted from that same unshorn hair. And she said to him, "You will be protected by one of your fingers if you change your name." The military commander had only 3 fingers left. And for a long time, he racked his brain trying to figure out how to interpret the dream. Finally, he decided that he would change his name, Peter, which denotes a rock, to something that means the opposite of rock. And he decided on water, and boarded a ship, letting his new name, Wanton Water, carry him off at will. His boat passed the island of Thasos and mashed against the underwater reef. And the water cast him upon a deserted piece of land. Having no idea where he was, he began to live in a kind of total solitude that makes nails peel and eyebrows turn gray. He divided the voices in his mouth into masculine and feminine. On Marian holidays, he uttered only the words of his prayers, and on the other holidays, only the consonants, the vowels on one day and the consonants on the other. He probably never discovered that he was living and would die on one of the 3 fingers of the Chalcidi Peninsula, on the cape facing the open sea, which in ancient times was called Acte. Word of ascetic life reached Greece. They say he was betrayed by the birds he had taught to speak. One by one they flew into Constantinople, lit on the masts of ships, the females cawing the vowels, and the males the consonants of the prayers. Every Sunday, from the fleet in port, the birds on the mast would be heard spelling out Our Father and Hail Mary. I'll leave you there because it goes on and on. And it's a very mysterious book, and Carol would have fallen in love with it. Yes. And
The granddaughter, I think, wanted to say a few
oh,
words.
please, I'm sorry. Yes, please.
So I'm Marie, I'm Carol's granddaughter, and I was called her Granny. She was so smart and so sweet and patient with us, and we were always bouncing off the walls, but she was always watching us do dress up or make crafts and inspiring us to go garden or write poems and just explore our creative freedom. And I would also call her every time I liked a boy. She was so excited. She wanted me to find love so bad. And she would say, "Okay, well, you can't kiss him." And I'd say, "Never?" No. She said, "No, I've never been kissed." She was really funny, and the way she would land jokes was really cool. And she was a brilliant teacher. So she would patiently and really swiftly communicate information. And every time I needed help with a paper, she was there helping me, and she just loved reading, so she knew so much already, and she knew how to write so well, and so I would have her help me write. And she was brilliant at tennis and sailing and poetry, I love everything that she's taught me, and she's inspired me to lead with my heart. And I also love that she lived her life with that ambitious tenacity about winning the sailing competition, especially at 63. And just to prove the point that a woman can beat a man at any age. And I'll continue to be inspired by that.
Oh, thank you so much. At this time, we should all look at the pictures and the slideshow. And I thank you all for coming, and I think I need another ticket for the dinner. I wonder if there's a ticket left for the dinner.
I don't think there's ticket left, but I bet if you showed up, they'd probably let you in.
Because
Yeah.
we're bringing 2 people.
Oh, wonderful, okay.
Yeah, so I
Nice.
will get another ticket.
We'll figure it out.
from
We'll-
Yes.
Definitely.
That's the Lions Club dinner, and 2 people we know, Emily and Dana Hallman, are the guest of honor, so many people may want to go to that. But please look at the slideshow, which has been prepared for us, and the wonderful pictures over there. And I want to thank my friends from the Art Rich Poetry Roundtable.
And I'd like to thank
Thank
Virginia.
Yes.
for everything.
And I'd like to apologize for the noise out there, but I think somehow Carol would have loved it.
Yes.
The kids were making such a racket that in her memory. So.